You don't know anything.
You attacked me personally.
You're so deluded.
Oh, right. I've only been a professor for 51 years.
On this program, I've never been able to finish a thought.
How many books have you published?
Hey, Alan, you deserve a tall glass of shut-up juice, so can you just shut up for us?
Oh, my God. Oh, boy.
So
I will not sit here and stand for blasphemy against me. You don't need to do that.
This man said blasphemy against me. The act or offense of speaking sacrilegiously about God or sacred things. Interesting. Friends, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, hit like, comment, subscribe. It really helps us out, and I appreciate everybody who does that. Kyle Kulinski went on Piers Morgan. He DM'd me to let me know that because we're really good friends. As you guys well know, always have been. I've never had a single negative thing to say about him ever. But he went on Piers Morgan, and he says it got pretty spicy. We will be the judge of that. We're going to skip right to the panel. This is what I think is going to happen to news, like mainstream news. I think this is going to happen. Like, I think they're just going to go full lolcow, because that's the only way they're going to be able to compete. I really feel like we're going to see like these Piers Morgan style panelists that are just completely off the rails. We're going to start seeing that on like MSNBC and CNN. It just seems like that's what the people want. This gets so many views. Piers Morgan regularly gets between like 1 and 3 million views. It's insane.
Souffle, and just in the end play into his hands.
Well, I think they thought
why
that this
is
was going
Trump
to be an
so hard to
effective.
poll?
I did.
Oh no, Lichtman. Have we seen Lichtman in public since the fall of the Keys? The great fall of the Keys? Has anyone actually seen him in public since then? Is this the first time?
I went on Fox News 10 days.
Man, there's a compilation of him. It's like a montage of him slowly realizing that the election wasn't going his way. And it's so goddamn funny. Here's one clip.
He's now up 4 points. I don't get it. Why they think Trump's going to win Pennsylvania.
I'm not worried about Pennsylvania. I think Pennsylvania's looking good for Harris.
I do too. But I'm saying the New York Times gives a slight edge to Trump, and I don't understand that.
Yeah, I wouldn't read into that too much.
Oh no. Is that just a New York Post clip? Jesus. All right.
Before with Brian Kilbin said, I think he's going to win big. But actually, most people thought we'd be incredibly tight and it could go either way and so on. But it wasn't that at all. Why do you think Trump is so difficult to poll? Which is clearly the conclusion I would draw from this.
Well, you know, I am forthrightly willing to admit I missed this election. I still think I actually had 10 out of 10 before. I think I was right about 2000, but we're not here to litigate that. I still think it's a pretty good record. Now, I think two things are operating here. Number one, I was incredibly critical at the time of the spineless, cowardly Democrats openly and viciously trashing their elected president and their elected nominee right out there in the open. I have never seen that before, and I've studied American politics since the founding, and that taint.
I mean, we just need to be realistic about what happened after that debate. That debate scared the shit out of people. It was the worst debate performance in history. You know, I was a big Biden stan. Took me a minute, but you know, it shocked me, that horrible debate performance. So we just need to be realistic. I feel like there was always going to be a push to replace him after that debate.
Any nominee. And they're now taking no responsibility for that. They're blaming everybody else. Until they look in the mirror, the Democratic...
I don't know if he's operating under the assumption that Biden would have done better than Kamala. He seems to be hinting at that. I have seen no evidence that this is the case.
Party is going to be in trouble. Secondly, why did my keys miss? Because my keys are based upon the proposition that a pragmatic, rational electorate decides whether or not the White House party is governed well enough to get 4 more years. That was exploded this time by a new wave of I don't know if I don't know why anybody would bank on the median voter being super rational and well informed. Why would anybody bank on that? information that we've never seen before, in addition to the usual sources of disinformation. We had a huge change this time, a 300 billionaire, a guy who's richer than most countries of the world, who controls X, spreading vast disinformation. According to reports, billions upon billions of viewers saw his disinformation. People have a completely distorted view of the economy.
What was the disinformation?
Inflation is going up.
Let me pin you down on that, though. You say Elon Musk was spreading disinformation. Like what?
Democrats are flying illegal aliens to swing states so that they could eventually turn them into voters, playing into great replacement theory. He was basically just copy-pasting great replacement theory. He was saying that American democracy was going to crumble if Kamala Harris won. He was lending credence to this idea that there's this huge crime epidemic involving migrants. There isn't. We could go on and on and on and on and on. I think on the entire platform, I think I saw a post saying that he was ranked 200 or something in terms of who gets community noted the most on the entire platform. I mean, what's going to happen if I go to his feed right now? What am I going to see on his feed right now? I mean, I don't know how much disinformation we're going to see. I feel like maybe right now it's going to be more like we're taking over and everything's super based. He had no discipline when it came to, I mean, he kind of treated Twitter like Trump did, where if he saw something pop up on his feed, he would just kind of instantly repost and talk about it and blah, 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 blah. He dabbled in like explicitly anti-Semitic stuff too. Wasn't it someone that was like, I swear at this point he follows like 3 or 4 like not so subtle Nazis and regularly interacts with them? It's just victory lap stuff right now. But yeah.
Yes. He is spreading vast disinformation that's sunk in. Even people who think their own financial situation is pretty good think inflation is going up when it's been cut by 75%, that unemployment
but it's still
is
inflation.
a near high when it's
still inflation,
near a low.
On that point, see this.
This is such a stupid point. I don't know if Piers expects that we just not have any inflation. Oh, sorry. My bad. Yeah, some inflation is perfectly healthy for an economy. It is a fact that inflation topped out like around, what was it, 8.59% in 2022. It slowly came down and now it's at 2.4%, which is a completely normal level of inflation. And Republicans, including Musk, Donald Trump, and all of these pundits have been running around telling their followers and viewers that inflation is still at record highs. We saw FaZe Banks, when he posted on Twitter endorsing Donald Trump, he was talking about how inflation is currently at record high. He was talking about how crime was spiraling out of control all over the country. Neither of these things are true.
It's interesting. You would say that's disinformation, but the point is that inflation is still not zero. Therefore, prices are still going up. Therefore, people. The
only way you get inflation to zero is with a recession.
Yeah, but here's my point.
Obviously.
Here's my point. Yeah, but here's my point.
No, the point that you just made is stupid.
Democrats kept telling the American people rather arrogantly, I thought, the economy is in really good shape. Meanwhile, inflation still exists. In other words, prices have continued to go up and up and up, albeit not at the same rate.
I think Democrats could have done a better job of acknowledging the harm that occurred to people, acknowledging that people felt stretched beyond their comfort zone when it came to pinching pennies during the height of inflation. They could have done a better job acknowledging that while also touting the successes of our economy compared with the rest of the developed world. So you can talk about how inflation has been going down, 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 down. You can talk about how GDP is at a very healthy level. You can talk about sustained low unemployment. But I don't think that Biden did a good enough job tapping into people's fears, frustration, anxiety. Yeah.
They were going up. But if it wasn't zero, and it wasn't, it was like 2.5% or whatever by the end, that is still inflation. So it's not disinformation to say
the only
Americans
way
are
you
still
get it
suffering
to
inflation.
Zero is a recession, is deflation. That's ridiculous. Inflation has been cut by 80%, but it's not just inflation that people are wrong about.
But do you accept inflation means prices are still going up?
Yes.
Do you accept prices were still going up?
Of course.
Yes.
Right, so
they
that's
always
the point.
do unless you have a
not
recession.
That's not disinformation,
That's ridiculous.
then, is it? By Elon Musk,
and
that isn't.
No, for Elon to say that we're still experiencing like record inflation, that's disinformation.
Disinformation about every other aspect of the economy as well. Disinformation about undocumented immigrants.
I actually feel like I feel like I criticized him at the time when Biden was doing the whole Bidenomics thing. I thought that was so risky. I'm like, really? He was doing Bidenomics, like touting Bidenomics. I feel like back in 2022. You can be proud of the policies that you pass. You can be proud of things like the infrastructure bill and the CHIPS Act or whatever. But when you start claiming credit for the economy while people are experiencing high inflation and then calling it Bidenomics, I feel like that was a serious strategic error.
It's like they're bloodthirsty killers. They are the most law-abiding segment of our society, according to numerous studies, including by the
I think Bidenomics thing was an attempt at playing offense over defense. I mean, I'm sure that's true, but he was out there talking about Bidenomics and people were going to the store and eggs cost more. They were going to the gas station and gas cost more. And it was just, I feel like it was really dumb messaging.
Libertarian Cato Institute, they commit crimes, including violent crimes, less than half of that of Native Americans. And they don't drain our economy. They are the mainstay of the agricultural, construction, personal service, hospitality industries. Studies show you will drive the economy into a recession if you go through large-scale deportation of immigrants, and you will sweep it huge numbers of U.S. citizens because all the databases used to identify undocumented immigrants are fundamentally flawed. You can't have a pragmatic electorate under these conditions, and the mainstream media is utterly feeble.
Oh, we see Cenk cooking over here. What's he working on?
Spends 20 times more time on meaningless polls within the margin of error than it does telling truth to power and indicating the consequences of this election.
But it is
it's
okay.
being taken over by billionaires.
Okay, I'm going to come to Cenk. I mean, Cenk, the biggest deporter in American presidential history was Barack Obama, who deported over 3 million people. This idea that Trump is going to become some outlier in terms of mass deportation. The great mass deporter was actually a Democrat president, Obama, by a long way, by the way.
The framing of this is so bad. And I just don't expect Cenk to call him out on this. But Trump is the deportation plan that Trump is running on, the plan that he's proposing, the specific plan that he's proposing, goes well beyond anything that Obama did, anything that Biden did, anything Trump did in the first term.
So this idea of like disinformation, I think some of it was disinformation, but it's I think the idea that this election was only won through right-wing disinformation. I'm afraid I view that as a total delusion by the Democrats. Again.
Yeah, I totally.
Wait, are you not going to call him out on that?
Totally agree with you. I'm sorry, but
Oh, Cenk. Oh no, this man Cenk, bro. He seems to be following Anna Kasparian off the ledge, because he tweeted some shit today. Bros, he tweeted some shit today. Like, look at this. I asked Elon Musk to put me in charge of cutting the Pentagon, and he said, "What are your suggestions? I run the largest left-wing network online, and a Democratic leader has never asked me that question." The idea that they would take advice from a populist is disdainful to them. Now, which side seems more open and inclusive? Which side seems more welcoming? And which side tries really hard to drive you away if you disagree even a little with orthodoxy? Which side is asking for suggestions? And which one is demanding compliance and obedience? Bro, are you kidding me? There's no room in the Republican Party for anyone who even lightly rebukes Donald Trump. They have pushed every single Republican out of Congress. Jeff Flake, Mitt Romney, Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, Mike Pence now. There's no room for anybody in the current MAGA movement who hasn't sworn complete loyalty and fealty to Donald Trump. And he's taking Elon being Elon as some kind of an indication that, well, actually, it's the Republicans that are being more open and exclusive. It's just a wild thing to say.
I totally disagree with Juan and Professor Lichtman. Don't blame the voters. I think, look, we could get into this discussion, but Juan, I think you're blaming the voters. I think that's a terrible idea. Look, I debated Professor Lichtman before. I told him his theories about the keys were absurd. I was right. He was wrong. I said he'd lose his keys.
No, you were
Couldn't
not
find
right,
him
and
before
I
the
was
election.
not wrong, and that's a cheap shot, and I won't stand for it.
Well, who won, brother?
You should not be taking cheap shots at me.
Who
You
won?
want to make your point,
total
don't make it
world of
personal.
denial.
I read your own followers' comments, and they all trashed you, every one of them, and supported me. So
Yeah, right,
quiet with
right.
your personal
yeah,
attacks.
come find out again.
Make whatever
Okay.
point you want.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't
Look,
make it
you
personal.
don't know anything. You don't know
You
anything.
attacked me
You're
personally.
so deluded.
Oh, right. I've only
Okay.
been a
Can I
professor
just-
for 51 years.
On this program,
published
I've never been
13
able
books.
to finish a
How
thought.
many books have you published? No, because you're personally
Yeah.
He
attacking
published a book shortly before he ran for president earlier this year.
me again. Say whatever you want, but I'm not going to
Okay,
stand
but
for
brother,
personal
you got it
attacks.
wrong.
Say
you were
whatever you want.
preposterously and stupidly wrong. So, okay, all right. Can I just
Don't
finish
call
a
me
goddamn thought
stupid.
ever on this show?
No, not if you're
Okay,
personally
well,
I
you proved
admitted
it.
I was wrong. I don't need you to call me stupid.
Okay.
Can I just say it's
What kind
great
of-
all getting
Who
along
taught
so
you
well.
manners?
It's lovely to
Let Harry speak, okay? He's just been sitting here, guarded, waiting in the wing, waiting in the wings.
Right now.
Hey, Alan, you deserve a tall glass of shut up juice, so can you just shut up for a
Oh my god. Oh boy. I'm telling you, this is the future of content. It's just the future of content. We're going to be seeing stuff like this on CNN. Mark my words, okay? Because the CNN and MSNBC, their views are going to keep dipping, and they're going to look at Piers getting like a gazillion views on every single video. And they're going to try to emulate that. Like, they already do have debate panels-ish now, but it's just going to get so much more absurd.
second? And let someone who knows what
Not
they're doing.
if you're
so
gonna
right,
personally
Piers.
attack
You're
me.
so right.
So-
We're so
Make any
unified right
point
now.
you
Okay.
want.
So-
I will not sit here and stand
So-
for personal attacks, for blasphemy against me. You don't need to do that.
This man said blasphemy against me. What? Hold on. Is there some hidden meaning to the word blasphemy that I'm missing? The act or offense of speaking sacrilegiously about God or sacred things. Interesting.
You don't boost your
Blasphemy
ego
against you?
by
Who the hell are
attacking
you?
me
Are you
like that.
Jesus
Just
Christ,
make
you
your points.
loser? Okay, can
Make your points.
I just give the correct answer for once?
God, you know what? I do feel bad for Lichtman. It's hard not to feel bad for him. The keys just... And listen, I told you guys, I was like, I don't know about these keys. I don't know about these keys. Some people would come in the chat and talk about the keys. Maybe I was hypnotized by the keys for the first like week that I found out about them. And then after a minute, I was like, I don't know. This doesn't seem very scientific to me.
Okay, here we go. So, guys, you're blaming disinformation. There was disinformation. There was the cats and the dogs nonsense. The points you're making.
Yeah, I'm a keys denier. I'll say it. Yeah. Allan Lichtman had the balls to say I was wrong. I don't see why he doesn't get more kudos for exercising some actual humility. To be fair, I'm not sure what choice he had in the matter there.
Making about undocumented immigrants, I agree with Alan, okay? But that didn't cost the election. The main disinformation was about how the election was going to be rigged. And it wasn't rigged. It was dumb. They won easily. There was no need for that disinformation. You guys are missing the whole point. The people who are at fault are not other people. It is the candidate, Kamala Harris, the previous candidate, Joe Biden, Democratic Party.
I just don't understand this logic. I never have. Like, do voters have no agency? Do we not? At the end of the day, the voters chose Donald Trump. They heard what he had to say. They heard his pitch for America. They decided for themselves. He had the better pitch. To say that it's not like voters don't have any part to play in Donald Trump becoming president, it's all Kamala's fault. It's all Biden's fault. Well, I just, at some point, like there's some responsibility for the voters, surely, right?
Democratic leadership. You guys don't want to admit that they're the problem. They're the cancer in the Democratic Party. So you blindly lash out at the voters, at information, at social media, and you want to shut down anyone who disagrees with you. That's not...
How could anybody say that disinformation in 2024 is not a real issue in this country?
correct answer. There are
Look at the current cabinet. Look at the incoming cabinet. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. They recently, just today, unearthed video of him alleging that the United States government might have been responsible for COVID. And he's going to be the secretary of the HHS. And for Cenk to be like, oh, for you to blame it on disinformation, like, you don't think this is an issue at all?
three wings of the Democratic Party. There's the establishment wing that the great majority, almost everyone on television supports and kisses the ass of and does propaganda for. That wing has led to disaster. They lost to Donald Trump twice, nearly lost to him 3 times. And then the other wing is called the progressive wing, but those are two different sets of people. In the progressive, so-called progressive wing, what you have is the identitarian left, the people who do what the right wing would call woke politics and identity politics, and that is disastrous. That's what the trans ad was at the end, and it cost us. The most popular part of the Democratic Party is the populist left. That is the Bernie Sanders 2016 campaign. That part says...
He just said that's the most popular part of the Democratic Party?
Is the Bernie Sanders 2016... That's what the trans ad was at the end, and it cost us. The most popular part of the Democratic Party is the populist left. That is the...
So why did he lose 2 primaries in a row if that was true? This is just categorically false. This is just like something that is so easily disproven. Okay, so why didn't he win the primaries if that's true?
Bernie Sanders 2016 campaign. That part says, let's do super popular economic proposals like paid family leave, higher minimum wage, universal health care, public option. Let's do all of these things. And the establishment goes, no, our corporations don't want that.
Actually, like South Carolina primary voters do that.
Our donors don't want that. So we'll just do identity politics. And maybe identity politics will unite the left.
He just removes the voters from the equation altogether. Like the voters have no part to play in who becomes the nominee.
But it didn't. Identity politics led to disaster. It was a poison within the Democratic Party, used ironically by the...
Just because Bernie lost the primary doesn't mean he's not popular nationally. I never said that he's not popular. He's probably more popular than the average politician. But Cenk said he's the most popular wing of the Democratic Party is the Bernie Sanders wing. It's just patently false.
Establishment Democrats, because they didn't want to talk about...
That's the other point, Brightside, is that Kamala avoided identity politics like the plague. Like anytime she was asked questions about her race or gender, she would like quickly change the subject. She didn't lean into identity politics at all.
Popular proposals that we have, because their donors hate those proposals.
Okay, let me bring in Harry. Now, Harry, you tweeted or posted on...
Also, Kamala outperformed Bernie Sanders in Vermont. She got more votes than he did in Vermont. So
on X, on November the 6th, Kamala Harris's speech was amazing. Graceful, strong, hit the right tone. She's a fantastic leader and a great role model. No idea how she lost to Trump. You're a bright young guy, Harry. I've interviewed you several times. Right? You know why she lost. And that speech, in a way, to me, was the perfect illustration. She basically said nothing. She talked about billions of stars and the moonlight and shining lights and all that. There was nothing there. There was no meat on the bone, no substance. And that was her problem throughout the whole campaign. She had 100 days to show America, here's how I'm going to fix all your problems. Instead,
that's not a long time, bro. That is not a long time. It's just not a lot. Like she was swimming upstream. Like that was a difficult thing to do for someone to come in and take over. And she had some national profile, but not really much of like, how much did people know about Kamala Harris? You know, she was only in the primaries in 2020 for like 2 months. And then she became VP where she was largely out of the spotlight. And she had to hop in there and put a campaign together and run against Donald Trump, who had been effectively campaigning for years.
Instead, she did the Hillary Clinton playbook. After promising us joy and sunshine, immediately pivoted to Trump's a Nazi. They're all fascists. They're all...
I don't think she ever called Trump a Nazi. She definitely didn't call him a Nazi. And when any conversation about Trump being a fascist happened in the context of his own military leaders calling him a fascist, Kelly and Mattis and them.
Disgusting. And by the way, here are all my rich, famous entertainment friends who are all going to surround themselves on me on stages. Didn't work for Hillary, didn't work for Kamala. And at some point, young guys like you who are the future of the Democrat Party, you've got to wake up and smell the cappuccino. You need a candidate that can resonate. I mean, Cenk's right. The Democrat candidate who has most resonated with the public was Bernie Sanders, right?
There was no similar level of pressure put on Republican voters to have a come to Jesus moment with themselves after Trump lost in 2020. Like you didn't see people like Piers Morgan telling Republican voters, like, you got to start getting in touch with people. There was none of that. They only do this with Democrats lose. Only do it.
Right? You'd have done better with him running in this election. But you guys don't see it that way, do you?
Well, I think
You would have been better with who running?
You need a candidate that can resonate. I mean, Cenk's right. The Democrat candidate who has most resonated with the public was Bernie Sanders.
There have been multiple polls at this point to demonstrate that a significant portion of the electorate thought that Kamala Harris was too liberal. Not just like one poll. There's multiple polls now that show that the median voter had concerns that Kamala Harris was too liberal. We're in a pendulum moment where the pendulum is swinging to the right after it swung to the left. Voters are rejecting progressive politics right now. That's just what this moment is. And this idea that Bernie Sanders could have come in there and done better than Kamala is just, it's not based on any kind of data that I've seen.
Right? You'd have done better with him running in this election.
It's all just conjecture and, like, well, I know people who said they would have voted for Bernie.
But you guys don't see it that way, do you?
Well, I think that since the election happened and sitting with it for a couple weeks, I know why Kamala Harris lost. I think that what I said was premature. And I think it's a combination of what all the gentlemen around me are saying. I think it's like a middle ground in life, which I think is often the case, which is I think Professor Lichtman is right that it was a lot of disinformation pushed by a lot of bad actors in the right wing. Cenk and
there was
the gentleman beside me
hang
from
on,
Fox.
Harry. There was disinformation from the left as well. When you keep...
There's no comparison. There is no comparison. It's not like the left-wingers on social media don't catch on to a story. Sometimes it ends up being wrong, like that happens. But there's no comparison between these two sides right now. You have one side where a mainstream Republican Congress member, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is, I think, currently the most successful fundraiser for the entire party, during congressional hearings and on social media, floats ideas like Jewish space lasers caused fires in Hawaii. There is no equivalent to that in the Democratic Party currently. Maybe that changes, but currently there's no equivalent to Marjorie Taylor Greene on the Democratic side of things. There's no equivalent to like Lauren Boebert. There's no equivalent to Rand Paul. There's no equivalent to Matt Gaetz. They just don't exist on the Democratic side in the same way. Of course, you can find disinformation from sources both left and right, but that's not the question. The question is like, who does it more? And there's one side that clearly takes it to levels that you just don't see on the other side. 80% of Republicans polled still believe that Donald Trump won the 2020 election. That is the result of a years-long disinformation campaign meant to lie and obfuscate and undermine Joe Biden's win in 2020 and maintain the illusion that Donald Trump is this toweringly popular political figure in America when he's not. He's still bitterly polarizing, even after this win.
Calling him a Nazi.
But Piers, it's not to the same.
Hang on.
It's
Let me
not to the
finish my
same
point.
level.
When you keep calling Donald Trump a Nazi and a fascist and all these things, and his supporters Nazi.
He's been told so many times. It's like, dude, who was calling him a Nazi? Who was calling him Hitler? Who was calling him a fascist? It was his vice presidential candidate who called him America's Hitler. It was his own military generals that were calling him a fascist. Milley called him a fascist to his core. You have a career military guy, an academic who has studied fascist movements, told Bob Woodward he is dangerous. He is a fascist.
Sympathizers.
It was his own
all that is total
Yeah.
disinformation because he hasn't murdered 12 million people and he's not going to.
Well,
and by the
Piers,
way, you
Piers, like, he has his greatest hits of things that he says. I feel like you've heard this sentence come out of his mouth in every single episode of Piers Morgan for the last month.
all know that. So the disinformation is on both sides.
I disagree. I disagree with calling Donald Trump a Nazi or calling him Hitler. But I want to be clear that it was his own former advisors who called him that and likened him to Hitler. Kamala Harris never got on a stage and said, oh yeah, Trump's Hitler now. She just alluded to the fact and brought up the fact that his own former advisor said that. But I also want to make the point that I think that Cenk and the gentleman from Fox News is right when it comes to the economy. I think we were not great when it came to messaging on the economy. The benefit that Trump had is that he could put his slogan on a yard sign. He could say, Kamala Harris, Democrats, high prices, Trump and Vance, low prices. Kamala Harris, on the other hand, was tasked with explaining, okay, here's why inflation went up. Obviously, it's not Joe Biden and me. It's because of external factors. Here's why gas prices went up. Obviously, it's not me. It's external factors. You know, if you're explaining, you're losing, as the famous saying goes.
Yeah.
So that was the uphill battle that we had. And I think there was kind of a perfect storm that led to Donald Trump being elected. And I think that I disagree with Cenk.
But you're missing
often.
something else. You're missing something else,
Sure.
which is all the culture war stuff that we kept being assured by the left nobody cared about. No one cares about the trans debates, right? Nobody cares that biological men are wrecking women's sport. Nobody cares that they're invading women's personal spaces, and so on and so on. No one cares that kids are being put through mutilating surgery before puberty. And we kept being told nobody cares.
Oh my God, bro. What are we listening to? What does that even mean? I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. He's saying that prepubescent kids are getting surgeries?
Cares about this. Leave them all alone. It's transphobic. I'm not transphobic. I wanted trans people, as I still do, to have fairness and equality in their lives exactly the same as all of us on this panel. But when you keep telling people it is fair, on the one hand, Democrats said, we protect women's rights on abortion. On the other hand, we're absolutely fine for women's rights in sport to be traduced at this ridiculous altar of biological men who are now trans women competing against women and beating them. You can't be both. So the public went, this is, and you're shaking your head, but look, the New York Times did a report about that ad, which the Trump campaign did so successfully and repeatedly.
I saw it.
You know, Kamala's for they, them, Trump's for you. They reckon it moved the needle by 2.5 points. It was the most successful and effective 30-second ad in modern political history. So people did care. And the Democrats were just too deluded, it seemed to me, because most of them, you must realize this issue of trans athletes in women's sport is wrong. You all know it's wrong. For some reason, you wouldn't get off that train. And that delusion was one of the reasons that you lost so badly, I believe.
But
Who was
Piers,
talking about
to
this issue?
Professor Lichtman's point, that ad in and of itself contained misinformation. The ad was saying, oh, Kamala Harris wants to pay for prisoners' transgender surgeries.
All right, she said it a few years ago, but she said it.
But wait, hold on. In the New York Times also reported that this took place under Donald Trump's presidency as well, because depriving a trans prisoner the right to get gender-affirming care is, Cenk, it's the law, it's the Constitution, is against the Constitution of the United States, preventing cruel and unusual punishment. Because if somebody is deemed medically necessary to receive care, no matter what that care is, and you ban it or say, no, you can't get it, that absolutely falls under cruel and unusual punishment. So Donald Trump did the same thing. And that's an example of the disinformation, or at least the lack of context that Trump's campaign
do you accept, Harry?
No.
Do you accept that this
Cenk, I'm sorry, yes.
But do you accept the so-called culture war stuff that I would frame as the kind of very, very far left progressive woke stuff that I've seen a lot of Democrats in the more center part of the party coming out now and publicly saying what I was saying for a long time. Apparently Bill Clinton kept warning them internally. David Axelrod has come out and said, we've got to stop this. You know, Joe Scarborough did a big monologue about it on Morning Joe. At some point, you've got to recognize that most average Americans just found all that stuff complete bullshit. And that's one of the reasons you lost. And you've got to move on from it. If you come back with another woke progressive platform in 4 years' time, you will be out of office potentially for 4 more, 8 more, maybe 12.
Again, but like, what Democratic candidates that were running in elections all over the country were even talking about like trans people in sports? Who was bringing that up? Who was making that a part of their platform? That they were running on, like no discussion to be had about this subject whatsoever. I didn't see a single Democratic candidate anywhere running on this stuff.
12 more years. I promise you. Take it to the bank.
So, Piers, I agree to a degree, but not in the way that you're framing it. I think that we do have to move on from a lot of the culture war stuff. I don't like the word woke, but I understand the context of you using it. I think that, yes, and to some degree we have to move on. But by moving on, we shouldn't throw people under the bus. We shouldn't say, oh, you know, trans people are the reason why, or LGBTQ plus people are the reason why. That's not the reason why. It's just that the culture war stuff came off as very kind of gross to some Americans. They really didn't like it. So I agree to a degree, but not in the way that you're framing.
Okay, Juan, let's talk about race, because it seems...
Can I get in here?
Well, one sec, Jane.
Because
hang on.
Okay.
One thing, I'll come to you, Jane. Don't worry. One on the issue of race. Many people found it extraordinary that a guy who a lot of people think is racist beat a black woman, and that a lot of people that helped him win turned out to be a lot more black men voting for him than first time, and a lot more Latinos voting for him than the previous times. How important, if at all, was race in the end? Or was it actually a case of a lot of black and Latino people went, we don't care about all that stuff. What we care about is jobs, cost of living.
I didn't see topics, the discussion of race playing any kind of central role in the 2024 election. Any kind of discussion about race was happening like in the cultural discussion. Like the candidates weren't really talking about race all that much.
Illegal immigration and so on.
Well, I think everybody cares about jobs, cost of living, inflation, and so on. And by the way, I don't think you're right about those numbers. I think there were more black men than black women who went towards Trump. But remember, they're still a small segment of the overall electorate. The big shift, actually, as I said, Latino men was a huge shift, and they're also not that big a section of the electorate. The big electorate in this country still is white people, and overwhelmingly white men went for Donald Trump, and white women who I thought, and I think a lot of pollsters thought, given the abortion issue and the success of abortion as an issue that favored Democrats in 2020, but also after the Dobbs decision in 22 and all the referenda, the white women again voted for Trump. But so you talk about, is this a race issue? The race issue may be that white Americans were overwhelmingly in support of Donald Trump. And if you look at black America as overall black America supported Kamala Harris. Overall, Latino America supported Kamala Harris, even Latino men who had that big shift. So to me, race is a part of the story because, in America, the demographics are creating anxiety. And I think the anxiety is most evident in terms of white America seeing that there are more black people, but also Latinos as the second largest group in the country now, and rising number of Asians. It plays out in so many ways. And I think Donald Trump is just expert at exploiting, that racial anxiety to say to people, these Democrats are playing identity politics or whatever. I think the identity politics overwhelmingly is played by Donald Trump with white America.
Yes!
Cenk, you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, so look, I'm going to address what Juan's saying too. But first, Harry, I know that the same policy was under Donald Trump, but that's not disinformation. That's for our candidate to go out there and clarify that and to fight back and to make her case. But she refused to make her case. She barely did any interviews. They were all incredibly structured to protect her fragile ego. All she did was talking points. Donald Trump's out there, sometimes like a maniac, but a lot of times looking like a real person at McDonald's.
Here, I will agree with Cenk. I think that authenticity played a huge role, or perceived authenticity rather, played a huge role in this election. I think Kamala's message was very disciplined. It was very controlled. And I think voters more and more in the age of podcasts and long form content and 4-hour discussions on Rogan and these kinds of things, they're looking for a more authentic appearing individual. And I think that Kamala being so disciplined may have actually hurt her. Before the election, I was saying that would help her. I was wrong about that.
And with the garbage truck, and our side goes, "Oh, that's terrible." No, it's not terrible. Those are great photo ops.
It was brilliant.
When our guy is a corporate talking robot, that is not helpful. We are misdiagnosing the case here. So when on these
let me
identity
jump
issues,
in here.
the Republicans set traps. No, hold on. The Republicans set traps for us. So the great majority of the country is in favor of trans rights, and I'm 100% in favor of trans rights, and I bet you that the entire panel, including Piers, says that as well.
Yeah.
But when you go beyond rights and you say, hey, they dug and dug, they tried to find, hey, how about banning them from the military? Trump tried that in the beginning. It wasn't popular. Banning them from bathrooms, not popular. But they dug until they got to sports, and that was winning ground for them. And what I said is, guys, get out of there. It's a trap. You don't have to fight on that. You're falling into their trap.
I just don't know. Like, I feel like the conversation around sports becomes much more, I think, reasonable. I think there's like a leg to stand on when you're having a debate about sports when we get into like collegiate level or Olympic level or professional level or of some kind. I think that if we start banning trans girls from playing sports in grade schools, I just don't understand what the upside is there. I just don't get it. I really don't understand. And I'm just not willing to let that one go, you know? Because it's like there's no good options. There's really no good options there. If you do like a trans-only sports league, there's going to be like 20 people in the entire like northwest region of the country.
And what happened, as Piers can attest to, is everyone else on the left screamed, transphobe, fascist, Nazi. Let's dig in on our least popular position. That was...
Also, it's just the case that trans people have been competing in sports for decades. It's only been in the last 6 or 7 years that Republicans have like very forcefully made this a central issue of their platforms when they run in races all over the country. Despite the fact that when we're talking about trans kids competing in sports, we're talking about like 50 people in the entire country.
Terrible politics.
Totally agree with
and
that.
Juan, I love you, brother, but it ain't about race. It ain't about race.
You know what?
Latino men didn't vote for... Hold on. Latino men didn't vote for Donald Trump because all of a sudden they like white people or orange people. They voted for him based on economic issues. Democrats only think in terms of identity, but that's not working anymore. The number one identity people care about is not Latino, black, or white. It's class. Are you going to do something for the average man, or are you going to sit there and play identity politics so you avoid the more important questions that your donors don't want to talk about that actually helps the average guy, like paid family leave and higher wages?
Okay, Professor Lichtman.
You know, I don't get it, Cenk. I don't get it. You know,
Yes.
The reality is, like, Bill Clinton,
Or Lichtman, he's been trying to get in here for a minute.
Bernie Sanders, Barack Obama, they stood up for Obamacare. They stood up for fair pay. These are populist issues at the heart of the Democratic Party. You go after the Democratic Party donors and the establishment Democrats stood for those issues, brought them to the table, and won. And Democrats, if you look at what Joe Biden did in terms of bailing people out during the virus and saying that we have to have infrastructure and building, that helped working people in this country. But a lot of lies were told about that history.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, Professor.
Joe Biden was, without a doubt, does anybody in chat disagree? Joe Biden was, without a doubt, the most economically populist president of my lifetime, easily. It's not even close. It's not even close. And Cenk and people like him think it's as simple as, well, you should have just given people free healthcare. If you would have just given people free healthcare, then we wouldn't be in the spot right now. Ignoring number one, that you can give people economically populist policies. That doesn't mean that those things are going to be the most salient issues in the next election. And number two, it's really hard to give everybody healthcare with our system. It's really difficult to get a bill like that pushed through Congress.
Professor, I know you've got to leave us, so you wanted to jump in there.
Yeah. First of all, let me add a quick fact. There was no massive switch of black voters to Donald Trump. Donald Trump got 13% of the black vote, 11% the last time. That's 2% of a very small segment of voters. So that's one of the big myths of this election. Second big myth is that hindsight is 20/20. We have a lot of Monday morning quarterbacks who, after the fact, are telling us what Harris should and should not have done. And half of them are saying she lost because she was too progressive. She was too open to the charge of being a radical, a socialist.
It's not that she was too progressive, it's that she was perceived as being too progressive.
The other half have said, of course, she lost because she wasn't progressive enough. We heard that from Cenk today. It's all sports talk radio without the entertainment. There is no way to know after the fact what she should or should not have done. If she had only done this or that, it would have made a difference. That's just hot air with absolutely no proof. The difference
Perceived as a result of misinformation. Well, she was certainly running as a super progressive in 2020, but she obviously changed many of those positions to reflect the electorate more. She definitely moved towards the center on a number of issues.
difference that I bring to the table is a track record of successful prediction based upon
You
how
stick to those
American
keys, Alan.
presidential elections
You know what? Stick to
have
'em.
previously worked.
Don't let
as
Cenk get you
pragmatic
down.
decision making on whether or not the White House party has governed well enough. And then my analysis is based upon what's changed, what's shattered the pattern of 160
Are you telling me that Allan Lichtman is 77 years old? Is that true? Jesus Christ. He's 77 years old, guys.
years of history. So I have a base for my analysis. I'm not just doing Monday morning quarterbacking. Cenk, you need to learn some manners. Your act is getting really thin.
I mean, brother, I said what was going to go wrong. It did go wrong. I was right. You were wrong in this election spectacularly so with your so-called keys. And now you come and tell us not the Monday
And
morning
unlike you, I'm
quarterback?
willing to admit when I'm wrong.
Are you ever going to learn the lessons?
Can I
You
just
never-
ask, for
Because
those,
what
can
I'm
I just
worried
ask,
about,
hang on. Just ask, for those who
Have we ever heard Cenk admit to being wrong about anything?
have no idea what the key thing is all about, why are you flashing keys?
Like he's giving Allan Lichtman, which is like, okay, fair, you know. You can give him like a little bit of shit, I suppose. But Cenk entered the 2024 primary, and he was telling people like, yeah, I think maybe I can get up to 25%. If I can get 25% of the electorate, maybe then I can influence the Democratic platform to move left on a number of issues. This dude thought he could get 25% of the electorate, and he got less than 1%. So if you're gonna chastise people for being wrong about their prediction, like, okay, well, how did your primary go?
Okay, because this brother said that he had these keys and they were going to determine the outcome of the election, and all the keys were rigged in favor of incumbents. And I tried to explain to him, no, there are things outside of the keys. We literally had a debate, and I asked him, what if Joe Biden, this was back when he was defending Joe Biden, which now seems unconscionable, that what if Biden came and punched a baby every single day? Would your keys still hold? And he said yes. Okay, well then you're an unreasonable person.
I was right.
But what I'm most worried about
Biden.
is not the past.
Let me
it's the
explain
future.
why. I was right.
I mean, listen.
See, now Lichtman gets to say something that you can't technically disprove, but Lichtman's going to say, well, my keys were right about Biden, and if Biden would have stayed in the race, then he would have won. But there's no indication that is true. Every poll that we saw from Kamala, however flawed they were in favor of Trump this time, which they were kind of close this time, she improved on his numbers by like 3 or 4 points in every single swing state. Sometimes as many as like 5 or 6 points.
About Biden.
You have no idea how absurd you sound. Okay, but guys, the most important thing is not between me and Professor Lichtman. God bless you, brother. I know you did a lifetime's worth of work, and I feel a little bit bad about it. The reason I'm saying it is not to rub it in now. It's because I'm worried that in the next primary, you're going to tell people to vote for the establishment Democrat. That all of you on this panel are going to go, oh no, vote for the corporate robot, vote for the corporate robot. And that's going to destroy this party. That's why I'm fighting back so aggressively.
Give me a name.
No, vote for the populist left.
Give me a name.
If he says Bernie Sanders, I'm going to lose my mind.
No, in the old days, it easily would have been Bernie Sanders.
Who
now
is
he's
it now?
too old. So, look, I would start considering Sean Fain, head of the UAW, Sean O'Brien, head of the Teamsters, Jon Stewart. Go outside of politics. Almost everyone in politics is already corrupted. Find someone who is not corrupted and who's for the average.
Sean O'Brien, the head of the Teamsters that spoke at the RNC, that wouldn't even endorse Kamala this time around? You think he should be the nominee?
Man.
Harry, you're shaking your head, but I mean, Jon Stewart, if he could be persuaded, I would imagine.
There is some, I feel like there's a compelling argument to make for Jon Stewart. Like, I kind of get that. I kind of get that one. It may come to that, you know? It may come to that. I just feel like we may be entering a new age of politics where what worked for decades and decades and decades, this very what's the word I'm looking for? Very clean cut, very polished, kind of controlled reverence for tradition and institutions and these hallowed halls of Congress. And it may be that we're entering an age of politics where these things are just not going to get people over the finish line. And it could be that someone like Jon Stewart might be necessary to come along. And now I don't think Jon Stewart would ever run, but you know, maybe someone like Mark Cuban, you know what I mean? Someone who's outside of, like, if it worked for Trump, this outsider coming in, I think that could have bipartisan appeal. I think there are a lot of people in this country that are just looking for outsiders. As much as I may disagree, like, I prefer people with experience personally. But it may come to that. Like it's too early to say that. It's too early to say that, like say who the nominee should be in 2028. I think making predictions of who the nominee is going to be or saying who we think the nominee should be before we've even seen what the second Trump presidency looks like is a bit silly to me. Things are going to be a lot more clear a year into Trump's presidency. You know, he'll have a track record to attack. We'll sort of have a deeper understanding of where we should go as far as like messaging goes. Typically, incumbents are punished their first midterm. And so there's every reason to think the Democrats are going to have a good 2026, but we can't really necessarily like count on that. But there's so many unknowables right now. So reading tea leaves this far ahead, 4 years in advance, before Trump has even been inaugurated, I think is a bit silly. Like, we just don't know. We just need more information. We need more time to pass. And yeah.
Could be very good as a candidate, couldn't it?
No, I don't take objection to Jon Stewart. I just think we have some people in the Democratic Party who are very talented right now who could be the Democratic nominee. Governor Shapiro won Pennsylvania by like 20 points. Governor West.
Shapiro, Whitmer, Bashir, like these are kind of no-brainers. You know, to just like take a look at the country and take a look at what Democrats performed way better than Democrats all over the country in a climate where the incumbent party was being punished, not just in this country but around the world as well. And so like logically people like Shapiro come to mind.
Moore in Maryland. How much more connected to people do you need other than like Wes Moore, who's great? Raphael Warnock from Georgia won a swing state and is a senator from a swing state. Gretchen Whitmer, who had a trifecta in Michigan for the first time in a long time.
These are all obvious answers. Yeah.
There's really talented people in the Democratic Party who are elected officials right now, and Cenk can shake his head all he'd like, but these people are winning in.
Warnock is also he's also really good in front of a microphone, and he comes across as authentic too.
Swing states overwhelmingly.
Who would you like to see, Harry?
He just gave me like 8 names.
I just mentioned, I'd love to see. And there's plenty more, but I think we're going to have a great primary.
I'm pretty sure, I would lay good money now that J.D. Vance will be the Republican nominee in 2028.
I'd say that's probably a good bet.
Because I think he's actually, he in direct contrast to Mr. Waltz, who I thought was a total disaster. I thought J.D. Vance started with a lot of negativity, but became a real force for Trump, particularly in getting young men to come out and vote for him. So I suspect he'll be the nominee, but we'll see. Professor Lichtman, we can say goodbye.
I think that's certainly true. I think Vance had a really rough start, and he did a little comeback story in the last like 2 or 3 weeks of the campaign.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Obviously, I don't like him, but I'm just saying I think he will be a formidable candidate in 2028. I think he's savvy. I think he's good in like a podcast kind of setting. And that's a really huge asset in today's kind of like political economy.
I appreciate it. In a moment, though, we're now going to be joined by, to add to our panel, the Ohio State Senator Nina Turner. And first making his uncensored...
Oh, God. What is this lineup? Oh, my God. What is this lineup? It's like 3 libs versus 3 progressives.
...debut, the host of the Kyle Kulinski show, Kyle Kulinski. Well, Kyle, welcome.
I'll just tell you in advance what Nina Turner is going to say. She's going to say that Kamala would have won if she ran on Medicare for All.
Juan said to me, trying to get you for a long time. Just having a little chat with you before we get reaction from the panel. But why did the Democrats blow it so badly? And what do they do to avoid this happening again in 4 years?
I mean, the simple answer is that Kamala Harris kind of codes as a technocratic status quo manager, and Trump codes as a change
technocratic
agent. And so, I mean, to sum it up as simply as possible, voters just thought he's going to deliver more change. She's more of the same, and they broke for him.
Who would you like to see run the party now? I mean, what's the future of the Democrats looking like to you?
Jon Stewart. I've been pushing that since the day Trump won this time around, because what we need is, honestly, a controversial, charismatic celebrity might make all of the difference, but it's that mixed with Bernie Sanders' policies of actually delivering social democracy for people, raising their pay, getting them health care. I think that's the magic stew. And honestly, I think it's a shame that more people aren't talking about the controversial, charismatic celebrity portion of Trump being so successful, is that you can't keep the cameras off him.
In fairness, I feel like this is always Kyle's position. Like in any given position, the answer is always to run to the left in Kyle's mind.
Entertaining. Love him or hate him, you can't stop watching him. And so we need to sort of mirror that on the left. And I think the way of doing that is Jon Stewart.
But I would add to that what Bill Maher
And when you look at a map of like, have you guys seen these maps where it shows how each district went blue or red? Like if they, in terms of shift, it's just a sea of red arrows pointing to the right all over the country. The electorate so clearly moved to the right during the Biden years and leading up to this election. So to me, it's less clear that if you would have run on populist policies or social democratic policies like Medicare for all or $20 an hour minimum wage or whatever, that you could have like stemmed the tide. I just don't know. To me, that's not a really compelling argument.
I've been warning for a long time to liberals, speaking as a liberal himself, and I'm pretty much where he is politically, I think. I feel the same way. And I know you've been...
So I don't know if I disagree that someone like Jon Stewart might have to come in and kind of light a fire under this party's ass.
Been keen to say, look, Kamala didn't mention any of these woke issues, whatever, but she's very much associated with a lot of those woke issues. She's certainly voted in line with a lot of the more progressive stuff, like allowing transgender athletes in women's sport and so on. So she's seen to be a progressive who then moved rapidly to the centre when she got the nomination, and it was all too much of a screech for people, probably on both sides. But this whole woke ideology, I don't mean the original woke ideology of raising awareness for racial and social injustice. I mean the way it's become a kind of new form of fascism, where the far left just basically want to cancel, shame, and humiliate absolutely anybody who disagrees with them about anything. Do you accept?
We need to do seminars all over the world, workshops, to educate people as to what the word fascism means. You can't just be throwing that word around willy-nilly and comparing, people that want more representation in like Disney Plus Star Wars shows to Mussolini. When we talk about fascists, we're talking about people who have overt corrupt influence with business. We're talking about people who are usually rabid misogynists. We're talking about people who will use the military to imprison, torture, murder journalists, academics, dissidents. We're talking about, what does that have to do with like the current like woke brigade?
That has become a problem, a stick to beat the party with, which actually really damages them electorally.
Do you still call Trump a fascist? I think he has fascist tendencies. And to me, it makes me furrow my brow a little bit that his military advisors think he's a fascist. That, to me, is striking. He has overt authoritarian tendencies. I think he would imprison journalists he didn't like without like any kind of second thought whatsoever, if he wasn't constrained by our own constitution and our own laws.
No, I think Kamala ran basically the platonic ideal of a non-woke Democratic campaign. She never mentioned race. She never mentioned gender. She never mentioned trans people. She never mentioned pronouns or Latinx or cancel culture. She repeatedly stressed that she was going to represent all Americans. She ran to the right on the issue of the border. She talked about owning a gun. She ran on freedom and patriotism. And so when you put all that stuff together, I simply don't know what people are talking about when they say she's
they're talking about her record.
Those things at all.
Hang on. They're talking about her record as vice president of the Biden administration, where they never stopped talking about this stuff for nearly 4 years. So you can pretend when you get the...
They never stopped talking about what? Biden never stopped talking about what now? What is he accusing Biden and Harris of doing when they were president?
Nomination. Whoa, I'm a centrist and I'm a gun-toting Rambo, by the way, as well, to all you Second Amendment people. But actually, if you judge her on what she said and did in 4 years, she was a progressive left person. And to pretend otherwise is to just ignore what went on in that period.
What I'm much more concerned about is not Democrats being woke or Democrats censoring speech. I'm much more concerned about Trump's record on those things. So, for example, Trump said he wants to punish flag burning with a year in jail. That's against the First Amendment. He sued CNN for $475 million for calling election denialism the big lie. Before he was president, he sued Bill Maher for $5 million over a joke. He said he wants to open up the libel laws. He called for jailing journalists who report on the Supreme Court abortion ruling early before the decision.
How many of those things did he do in his first term?
Pro-Palestine protesters.
How many of those things did he actually do in his first term? Because it seems to me another problem, and he does this brilliantly, by the way, with the left. He sucks you in because he just shoots them at him.
He asks these questions, and I feel like it's just such poor framing because our Constitution does not allow him to do the things that his impulses tell him to do. That doesn't mean that he doesn't have those impulses. So you're like, well, you know, how much of that did he actually do in his first term? It's like, well, presidents can't just do like literally everything that they want to do. They're constrained by checks and balances. They're constrained by the Congress. They're constrained by the courts. They're constrained by the Constitution. They're constrained by the laws. But he demonstrates what his impulses are very, very clearly. Donald Trump does.
But he says stuff that crosses his mind or whatever. And rather than pick him off on stuff he actually does.
This is like when people defend him by saying like, well, you know, did he actually steal the election? No, you know, well, it was a peaceful transfer of power. He left on the 20th and it was a peaceful transfer of power. Just ignoring what he tried to do right up until that time.
You all go completely nuts every time he opens his mouth and says something a bit crazy. And if I was advising the Democrats, I'd be like, stop doing this. You're literally playing into his trap every time you do this. Just pick him off. If you want, pick him off on the stuff he actually does. Then you got a better chance.
All right, I'll do that. Here, ready? He gag ordered the EPA from telling the truth on climate change. That's deeply anti-free speech. He arrested and charged 6 journalists with felony rioting. He did not pardon Assange. He did not pardon Snowden. He did not pardon Daniel Hale. He wanted to invoke the Insurrection Act to deploy the U.S. to deploy our own troops against George Floyd protesters. These are all things that are actually on the record, things he actually did. And the thing that I find incredibly frustrating is that nobody talks about it. Trump magically gets a pass for things he actually did.
He doesn't get
Democrats
a pass.
get held to a super high standard.
He absolutely gets a pass. He absolutely gets a pass. The Democrats are held to such unbelievably higher standards than Donald Trump. There are no standards for Donald Trump. He can just say whatever the and people will just kind of be like, oh, that's Trump. That's just Trump being Trump.
He doesn't get a pass.
How many times have you heard people say those things I just told you?
Trump has had...
Wait.
Hang on. Let me answer you.
When was the last time you heard that?
Trump has had the most unrelentingly hostile media from a mainstream media that is largely staffed by liberals. We know this because of the way they all go nuts when their paper wouldn't come out and endorse Kamala.
How many media outlets have we seen like bend the knee and kiss the ring for Donald Trump? Like you had the Washington Post, which decided to break from decades of tradition and refuse to endorse anyone for president. You had Joe and Mika just yesterday announcing that they wanted to start a new dialogue with Donald Trump. You have CNN that was bought by, in part largely owned, I think, by a super right-wing guy, and their programming became like way more centrist. We've seen the media in real time over and over and over again adapt, evolve, and change to accommodate the Trump era.
They'll all resign, so they reveal their true colors. Cable news the same, MSNBC, CNN, you can fire a harpoon around their newsrooms and you wouldn't hit a conservative, right? So let's just get real about the way mainstream media is made up. I've worked in it, and there are very few conservatives, and that is part of the problem as well. And I just think that ultimately, if the Democrats are going to try and make themselves electable, they've got to move wholesale on now to a far more effective way of campaigning. And it can't just be every time Donald Trump speaks, mass hysteria, shaving your head, you know, going on TikTok and posting videos of yourself screaming and saying you'll never have sex with a Trump.
Why are you pointing to the most extreme examples from random users on social media as if this represents like the median Democrat? This is so disingenuous.
Supporter again. All this stuff is insane.
How about just telling the truth? Wait. How about just telling the truth? That's a radical idea, right? When was the last time you heard that Trump arrested and charged 6 journalists with felony rioting? Who talked about that? Did CNN talk about that? Did MSNBC talk about that? Did you talk about that? Nobody talks about it. And the fact of the matter is Trump attacks Democrats 4 times as hard as they attack him.
Yeah.
So if anything, the lesson to take away is the opposite. Democrats should get more arrogant, they should get more aggressive, and they should tell the truth more.
Come on, Kyle. You know that would be utter suicide.
No, that's the truth.
You know what? You wouldn't be as good at it as he is, because he does it with humor. You lot all do these.
There are no rules for someone like Donald Trump. He is allowed to essentially lie with more or less impunity. It's so difficult to take on someone like Trump because he's just not bound by the same set of standards or morals or ethics as normal people. He can just take a sledgehammer to everything. And unfortunately, a lot of people find that appealing. It is what it is.
incredibly straight-faced, virtue signaling.
It's way more difficult to try to preserve institutions and affect real change than it is to just come in with a flamethrower and a sledgehammer just to try to tear everything down.
I'm outraging faces. And it's like, if you all just chilled out a bit, have a bit of Kool-Aid, have a bit of a laugh.
Why are you telling me to chill out when, you know, Republicans are over here talking about how Democrats are trying to like literally kill God and mutilate children? I'm the one who needs to chill out. Have you heard the rhetoric? Have you heard the rhetoric from these insane religious conservatives that have completely taken over the party in the last 50 years? This devil's bargain that the Republican Party made with evangelical Christians in this country has reached a fever pitch, the likes of which I have not seen at any other point in my life. The insane rhetoric coming from these religious freaks has just gotten so out of control. It's so unbelievably dialed up to 11.
Jon Stewart.
Well, actually, you're right. Jon Stewart gets exactly the right tone. On that, I agree with you.
That's right. Yeah.
I would be willing to bet like 1 out of 2 like Trump voters probably think I'm possessed literally by Satan. And I'm not even kidding. It's somewhere between 1 out of 4 and 1 out of 2. It's somewhere between 25% and 50% of people that voted for Donald Trump literally think that I am possessed by Satan. I don't even think I'm exaggerating. I think that's entirely accurate.
Yeah, we agree. Yeah, I agree. Let's bring in Nina Turner and the rest of the panel. Nina,
I just want them to stop annihilating the truth. That's what I want. I want conservatives to stop annihilating the truth. The truth when it comes to climate change, the truth when it comes to crime rates, the truth when it comes to immigrants, the truth when it comes to science and vaccines. For Christ's sakes, I just want them to stop annihilating the truth, okay? That's what I want. I would love to live in a world where they would just stop waging this war on the truth.
You floated that Rahm Emanuel as a new DNC chair would be a good signal that the Democrat Party is only there for the donor class. Many other people would say that Rahm Emanuel is a very effective political operator. I mean, actually, the Democrats need a bit of that muscle now.
You know, Piers very effective at a cover-up. As we know, as mayor of the city of Chicago, he covered up the police murder of Laquan McDonald. He closed many schools in the black community. Certain segments of the black community are very outraged by him. He is more of the same and should be as far away from the DNC as possible. Now, if the Democrats want to lose again and get handed again like they just did in 2024, then go ahead and have Rahm Emanuel there. But if they want to do a new thing and answer to the world...
Well, they talk all this about Democrats, which is like, okay, fair, you know, like when the Democrats lose, I do want to understand like why it happened so it doesn't happen again. But dude, she lost both of her primary contests. She tried to run for a seat in Congress in Ohio's 11th district twice. She lost both times. She got destroyed both times. So when they smugly go on these shows and talk about how, you know, they give all this unsolicited advice to Democrats, it's like, you have to ask yourself, like, who are you in a position to be lecturing anyone?
Working class people of this country from all backgrounds, then they need to have somebody there, primarily who's going to say no more dark money in Democratic primaries. Rahm Emanuel is an absolute no. We know that the Chicago Teachers Union feels the same way, and many others will come out.
Yeah, she's a typical Bernie bro. Yeah.
Against him if he decides to run for that.
Okay. Juan,
One of the most prolific tweeters to have ever tweeted, Nina Turner. What does she do? That's a serious question. What does she do? Like, what is her day job? Just let me scroll through, make sure I don't see any porn or dead kids. No? Okay. She posts a lot, dude. And it's always just like, people deserve healthcare. We should do $15 an hour minimum wage. No more weapons to Israel. People should have health care. It's really this simple. Give the people health care. Why don't we do a higher minimum wage? And now she's doing the nothing will fundamentally change thing, which is just a lie about something that Joe Biden said in 2020. They just lie about it. Joe Biden in 2020, he was doing a private event with rich donors. Hella money. There were hella money people there, billionaires and millionaires. And he was telling them you know, like, listen, we may have to raise your taxes to pay for social spending programs, but your lives won't fundamentally change. That's what he was saying. That's what he was saying. He wasn't saying, like, when I'm president, nothing's going to change. He was telling rich people, like, look, we're going to raise your taxes. Like, if we have to raise your taxes, we disagree about the margins, but your lives are not going to fundamentally change. That's what that was. And they just lie about it. The path forward for the Democratic Party cannot include those who architected not having a primary, a House loss, a Senate loss, a White House loss, and the first popular vote loss for the first time in 20 years. The path forward must be getting corporate and dark money out. Yeah, get the corporate money out. East Palestine, what are they doing over there? This is all she does. She tweets like 50 times a day, bro. She's got so much stamina. It's unbelievable.
Let me bring you back in, because MSNBC is now at war, which is always entertaining to watch, because Joe and Mika from the morning show went off and revealed this morning.
And again, like the seat that she was running for in Ohio is a super blue district. Super blue district. It's like 85-15 blue. And she couldn't win a primary. And so she expects people to take the same platform that she was running on unsuccessfully in a super blue district of this country. And she thinks that candidates running in purple districts in Colorado and Texas should run on that same platform. It's really that simple.
To go and see Trump in secret at the end of last week after bombarding him with abuse for years and years and years, having originally been great friends of his. But another MSNBC presenter, Katie Fang, has now tweeted, normalizing Trump is a bad idea, period. So clearly there is an internal fracturing going on, which I suspect is going on in the Democrat Party at large, because I would urge them to be more collegiate with Trump. I've always felt that he's one of those guys, he's a natural pugilist. If you read his book, The Art of the Deal, he says, if you punch me, I'll punch you 10 times back. Actually, if you go and hang out with Trump, and I've criticized him as much as I've praised him, he can take criticism if he feels like you're not just unrelentingly abusive. So I actually thought that Joe and Mika, we'll play a clip from what they said this morning, but I thought this was a good move on their part. Let's take a look.
Show me footage, any footage ever of Donald Trump taking constructive criticism. Show me a single clip of him taking accountability if he's made a mistake. He very famously in 2020, much to the chagrin of some evangelical voters at the time, somebody asked him, have you ever asked God for forgiveness? He said no. He was he was running a campaign focusing on like courting evangelicals, and he had the nerve to get up there and say, I've never asked God for forgiveness. He did it on JRE. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. First of all, Joe Rogan didn't criticize him. Here we go in the title. Okay, hold on. This is him taking constructive criticism.
I want to talk about Amy Klobuchar.
No, that's Cenk. We're talking about Trump right now. Now, I don't know how many of you guys are raised with the teachings of Christ, okay? But if there's one thing that is central to being a Christian, it's asking God to forgive you. That is the most important element of Christianity. You literally cannot be a Christian without asking God to forgive you. It is essential to being a Christian. Not modern Christianity? No, that's not true. Find me a single Christian church in this country that is not centered in acknowledging that you're born into sin and that you need Jesus Christ and God to forgive you and show you the way. That is essential to Christianity. Gnostics don't believe that, Hutch. Checkmate lib. Yeah, but there's like 15 Gnostic Christians in the entire country. Anyways, this idea that Piers Morgan is saying that, well, actually Donald Trump takes criticism pretty well. Okay, show me a single clip of him acknowledging that he got something wrong, accepting some kind of criticism. Yeah, show me.
Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago to meet personally with President-elect Trump. It was the first time we have seen him in 7 years.
Now, we talked about a lot of issues, including abortion, mass deportation, threats of political retribution against political opponents, and media outlets. We talked about that a good bit. And it's going to come as no surprise to anybody who watches this show, has watched it over the past year or over the past decade.
Now there's reporting coming out today that the reason why they did this was because they were seriously concerned that Donald Trump and the incoming administration were going to take steps to try to punish them in some way. That's what the reporting is saying today. They had serious concerns that Trump was going to try to come down on them. And so they went to Mar-a-Lago and they kissed the ring. And it's just humiliating.
That we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of issues, and we told him so.
What we did agree on was to restart communications.
Well, what do you make of that? I mean, you know, I actually feel America's been so toxic in the way it's become so tribal, and they've been part of that, no question, on one side, and Fox have done it, I guess, on the other, and so on. Should we encourage both sides to come together a bit more, like they used to in the old days?
I mean, in an ideal world, yeah. And most Americans want that. Most Americans, when you ask them, want the parties to work together. I just don't know how you can do that right now. As long as Donald Trump has complete control over the Republican Party, I don't know. I mean, Joe Biden certainly proved that it was possible. He got some bipartisan immigration. He got some bipartisan legislation across the finish line. So it's not that it's impossible. Yeah, ideally, you would see both parties working together to get stuff done for the American people.
Sure. I mean, look, I'm all for people working together, building bridges, kumbaya. I'm all for it because I think, you know what? If you look at the Congress of the United States, totally polarized, they're also totally paralyzed. They're not getting anything done. Yeah. We need to get things done. And on the world stage, I could go on and on. But I think that with Joe and Mika, and I watched that show, so I'm no critic of it in that sense because I subscribe, if you will. But let me just tell you, it looked to me like their ratings have gone through the floor.
They have, yeah.
And I think that when people talk about Trump, you talk about Trump, he's a celebrity. People have said you can't take the camera off him. I think for them, it's like, you know what? This is a way to get back in the media ratings game. You know, the idea that we're connected to Trump. People like to advertise on shows they know the president might be watching. They would love to get Trump to, instead of watching.
Now he's framing it as though Joe and Mika were after ratings, and I'm sure that's true to a certain degree. But again, the reporting today suggests that they were seriously worried that Donald Trump was going to use his power as the president to try to come down on them in some way. I don't know what that looks like, but yeah.
Fox and Friends to watch some of Joe and Mika, Morning Joe. But, you know, to me, that's it really calls into question, have they been authentic when they were saying that this guy is so harsh when it comes to women, so harsh and racist when it comes to blacks and Latinos, and has an authoritarian, even as we were saying, fascist streak. So were they sincere about that, or are they now falling in line with others who find, you know what, I want to get on the bandwagon because Trump has just been reelected and won the popular vote? Yeah. To my mind, you got to be straight about your authentic sense so that the audience can trust you, and I think they put that at risk today.
Well, it's interesting, Cenk, because the journalism professor and author
Piers.
Jeff Jarvis has accused them, Joe and Mika, of inflicting a, quote, betrayal on their colleagues, democracy, and us all. He tweeted, it's a disgusting show of obeisance in advance.
Yeah. So I have a different opinion than everybody here. My first question would be, what are we agreeing on? So if you want to go to Trump to get him to agree on things that we agree with, like an anti-war position, fantastic. Of course we should be open-minded to that. You'd be nuts not to be open-minded to that, right? If he were to actually do anti-corruption, which he always promises but never does, right? And you can get...
Remember, when these people say anti-war, what they mean is like pro-Ukrainian surrender. That's what they mean when they say that.
Them to be open to that, fantastic. But why are Mika and Joe going there? To push for the public option? No, they're going over there to get access. And so they seem like utter frauds. Like, if they could show me policies that they care about that Donald Trump agrees to, or they have a strategy to get Donald Trump to do good and decent things, great. I'm super open to it. Look, I would want to do that. I got no problems with me meeting with Donald Trump, Elon Musk, or anything else along those lines. But what I'm not going to do is compromise my principles and my ideas just to get access. Yeah. So, like, for example, I mean, see the Democratic Party instantly going in the wrong direction. Rahm Emanuel is the biggest dog for corporate donors. Picking him could be the worst possible thing you could do. Do you know that Rahm Emanuel lost 1,000 seats on his watch when he was at the DNC nationwide for the Democrats? There isn't a bigger loser in the Democratic Party. So look, we need a populist like Jon Stewart, which I actually, if you remember, Piers, I tried to get him into this race.
Yeah.
But John, call me. This guy never wants to, he doesn't realize how intensely popular he could be. By the way, another candidate for president could be Nina Turner, a person who actually fights.
Even she laughed at that one. She was like, wait, what? What did he just say?
For the average person, has always been right about the populist left and then going for class instead of always being worried about identity politics. So there's so many options here.
Yeah. Kyle, a lot of people now say, including John Fetterman, that Nancy Pelosi should go. She's the godmother, the enforcer. Now she's blaming Biden. You can't have it both ways. I think it's really ironic. You have a woman of age 84 and she's still hanging on. Why not give a younger generation opportunity to occupy that seat? I mean, Nancy Pelosi, it does seem to me they've got to move on. Haven't they? Get somebody younger, fresh.
Did you see Cenk's tweet and Hassan's response? No. Did he quote? I don't think a defense contractor who happens to be the wealthiest billionaire on the planet is going to genuinely listen to your concerns about what parts of the budget they're going to cut. This is preferring someone to lie to you rather than one who doesn't even do that. Good, Hassan. I agree.
New ideas?
I mean, I'm totally in favor of cleaning house, but at the same time, that 100% would include the genocidal maniac that is John Fetterman. So he's part of the problem that he thinks he's calling out here. He's one of the worst of the worst. So, but on the broader point of just bringing in new leadership, bringing in fresh ideas, bringing in people who believe in so.
I feel like, you know, love him or hate him, Fetterman is pretty popular in Pennsylvania. So seems pretty practically stupid to want to push him out right at this juncture.
Social democracy and Bernie Sanders' agenda, and they're willing to fight. 100% on
I mean, good luck pushing him out in Pennsylvania. We'll see if that happens.
For that.
Harry, celebrities like Oprah Winfrey, where it's now been revealed that...
To be clear, like, I think there are nuanced conversations to have about the conflict in Gaza, but I also recognize that, or I also, it's my opinion that Fetterman just goes, what? He just gets so deranged with it. So he's so far in that direction that it definitely makes me uncomfortable. So I'm not so over here like singing his praises in that way, but he's popular in Pennsylvania.
She and her company got paid closer to $2.5 million rather than the original $1 million as thought for the event they put on with Kamala Harris. Every single time out comes Oprah putting her arm around whoever the Democrat candidate.
Random aside, is anybody else super excited for Stalker 2? Bro, I cannot wait to play that game on this monitor. Every setting cranked up to 11. Do we know how long it is? Stalker 2 dev says the game is huge. It takes 100 hours to fully beat. Oh yeah. I'm a little concerned that I don't know if they handed out review copies of the game. So that's a little concerning. And Sark said that the games tend to be broken on release. And then he was saying that it's kind of like Bethesda where modders will sort of quote unquote fix the game after the fact. I've never played a Stalker game before, so this is gonna be my first one, but I'm excited, man. It looks good. It looks real nice. Is it Unreal 5? Stalker 2 will use Unreal Engine 5. Yes. Okay.
Then you see Beyonce, then you see, they all come out. I feel that's over, that Trump has barreled his way through that. And that his people like Joe Rogan, Elon Musk, and others.
Does your monitor still have burn-in, or did you get it repaired? You can notice the burn-in if it's like a gray. It's hard to explain. If it's like a black background, you can't notice the burn-in. And if you're playing a game, like I'm playing through Ghost of Tsushima, you can't notice it while you're playing it. But if it goes to a cutscene, or if you go to the menu and there's like a gray color grading kind of situation going on, then you can notice the burn-in. I could get it replaced. I just don't want to go through that. I just don't want to. I'm lazy.
They're not really conventional celebrities. You know, they're tech people in a tech world, really, or interviewers or journalists. Do you think this idea of the Democrats constantly being associated with super rich celebrities, singers, you know, pop stars, actors, and so on, is that over now? Because it seems to have backfired this time.
No, I don't think so. I think like the people you're describing, like Joe Rogan, are celebrities in their own right. Joe Rogan, his base of viewers just happen to be the people that Donald Trump wanted to get out to vote. The people who watch Oprah, the people that listen to Taylor Swift, happen to be the Kamala Harris is the best to get out to vote.
You know, women did not go out in the numbers that people expected when Taylor Swift.
Well, women still.
She got a lot of votes, for Christ's sakes. Donald Trump was bragging about getting 72 million votes. How many votes did he get in 2020? This idea that, you know, a lot of people didn't show up and vote for, he got 74 million. And I think, where's she at now? She's going to ultimately, it looks like she's going to get more votes than Donald Trump got in 2020. She's a couple 100,000 away from overtaking him. She lost. Stop this. Listen, I'm pushing back against this idea that a lot of people didn't turn out to vote. He won on the margins. He won on the margins. That's not cope. That's just real. It's true. It's absolutely true. It was another close election. But people like Piers and a lot of right-wing pundits on social media are framing this election as though it was this blowout landslide that gives Donald Trump a broad mandate. It's just not true.
Voted for Kamala Harris overwhelmingly.
Yeah, but I love Taylor Swift, for example, but everyone thought that would really change the needle. 500,000 people apparently registered to vote extra in 24 hours when she made her endorsement. But none of that was reflected in the polls.
You can't quantify that. We have no idea what impact that made. How could he sit here and say like, oh, well, is he saying like no Taylor Swift person was convinced to vote? There's no way to quantify it.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't effective. Who's to say that it didn't actually get out more people to vote? And that possibly the loss would have been worse if Taylor Swift and folks like Oprah weren't working with Kamala Harris. These people have, you know, they're famous. They have a lot of notoriety. So when they're doing something with a candidate, that speaks to people who are low propensity voters, people who don't pay attention to politics like everybody else does here, right? We want to get those people out to vote. And a lot of those people align with Kamala Harris. And if they see Oprah standing next to Kamala Harris, they're like, oh yeah, that looks cool to me. So I don't think that was a mistake. I don't think it like quote unquote backfired. Maybe there's a way to do it more strategically in the future. But to say that, oh yeah, no.
Well, she certainly should have done, this point has been belabored beyond belief, but like she certainly should have done a lot more podcast appearances, a lot more.
We shouldn't work with Taylor Swift, the biggest pop star on earth. I think that's foolish.
You know what, Harry?
Nobody cares, Harry. Nobody cares about celebrity endorsements.
I don't think they do.
Yeah, nobody.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, nobody cares about celebrity endorsements. Here, let me give you one example. If Democrats, for example, passed Build Back Better, the original Build Back Better that
Joe Biden could have passed his version of Build Back Better without Manchin's pared down version. Joe Biden could have passed every single item on his agenda for Build Back Better. I don't think it would have made a difference in this election. I don't think this election was decided by policy.
And Bernie were trying to get through. That included paid family leave, childcare, universal pre-K, free community college, expanding Medicare, higher minimum wage, lowering all prescription drug prices, expanded child tax credit. If you got that through, I think this election very well may have been different and Democrats would have won. And I don't think dragging out, you know, Taylor Swift or Beyonce or whoever else is going to make much of a difference because people like them for what they like them for.
Blaming Biden for that is just silly to me. It's just silly. It's just silly. Your options are so limited with a 50-50 Senate. There's only so much you can do. And if someone like Manchin comes along in a 50-50 Senate and says, I'm not going to sign that. I am not going to sign that bill. There's no way it's going to get done. Then you got to work with them. You got to pare it down. You have no choice. That's what our government does. That's how our government was structured.
They like them for the singing. They like them for the dances. They don't really want to hear their thoughts on the marginal tax rate.
Yeah. I mean,
100%.
I definitely agree.
I want to bring Dina back in.
I agree with Kyle on that, and I want to say, Jane, thank you for that presidential endorsement. Who knows what 2028 will hold? But they
I know it's not going to be you.
Overplayed their hand with celebrities. It's not that you don't want celebrities, but celebrities motivate the base that you already have. What this campaign did is they put too much stock in those celebrities. Those celebrities, just like my colleagues on this panel, just like myself, they only have one vote to give. Yes, they have influence, but you know who could have been a better influence on that race is everyday working class people standing by her side. Everyday working class people talking about how under the Harris-Walz
Joe Biden in which bill was it? Was it the IRA? Or no, it was the ARP. In the ARP, Joe Biden set aside, I think it was $38 billion to bail out the pension fund for the Teamsters. It didn't matter. They didn't get the endorsement. It didn't matter. I mean, I agree. Like having the support of working class people or having like a huge majority support is going to help you. But this was something that I think there was like 250,000 retirees and union members who directly benefited from Joe Biden coming in and literally bailing out a pension fund that was on track to become insolvent. He bailed them out. It didn't matter. They decided to, like a lot of those Teamsters decided to back Trump. It is what it is.
Presidency, things would be different for them, that the minimum wage would be increased, et cetera, et cetera. That did not happen. So although Taylor Swift is popular, obviously she's not that popular because she absolutely did not move the needle. And this is no...
How could you possibly know that? How could you possibly know that? How could you say something so confidently? I'm not saying that celebrity endorsements are everything, but I'm not saying they're nothing. She's saying she's saying that the Taylor Swift endorsement made no difference, even if it's just like 30,000-40,000 people or whatever, like.
Shade to her, it is just celebrities are good.
So the lesson you draw from that is you shouldn't help the workers because they support Trump anyways, or I'm confused. What point are you trying to? No, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do policies that help working class people. Obviously, I think you should. I'm just saying you can't necessarily count on voters to show up and vote for you, even when you do those things. Like we mentioned it before, but Joe Biden is, without a doubt, the most economically populist president of my lifetime. We can go down the track record. It's not even close. And policy was not the thing that determined the outcome of this election. People had certain opinions in their minds about the state of the country. A lot of people were misinformed about the state of crime in this country. They thought we were in the middle of this massive crime wave. We're not. They thought that we were in the middle of a recession. We're not. There was inflation that occurred. That's true. And voters blame the incumbent party. And I think that's it. I'm not saying you shouldn't try to pursue policies that raise people's wages, expands their access to healthcare, expands Medicare, paid family leave. These are all good policies that I would like to see implemented. But that's going to be really difficult to pull off right now, obviously, as the entire country has, basically moved right. And it's given the Republicans small majorities, but majorities nonetheless in Congress, and it's given them the presidency. So they're in control. And it just is what it is.
For the base, they are not necessarily.
But Nina Turner's saying all Democrats needed to do was run on these super populist policies, these super left-wing policies, when there's a few different polls out now that show that it was a huge percentage of the country. It was 45-50% of the country had serious concerns that Kamala Harris was too liberal. You had voters telling pollsters, I'm afraid that she was too liberal. And I don't know how you square that with Nina Turner saying, oh, it's just as simple as just running on Medicare for all. Those two things contradict each other. They both can't be right. So either the pollsters have it wrong, or she's just wrong and myopic in terms of her solution to this problem.
Really good to move those undecided voters.
The other thing, Nina, the other thing I would say,
did it too. The
other thing I would say,
the way they did it.
Yeah,
it was a very elitist way. It was the way they did it.
No, I agree with you. I just there's a different issue which Trump's nominee picks for the cabinet. I think I see a consistent pattern here. The one running theme of all of them is they're all good on television. Trump understands the power of television like no political candidate I've ever seen. He absolutely gets it because he's a TV guy. I did his Celebrity Apprentice show. I saw him at first hand. He loves the camera.
Have we even had a conversation about did the fact that he was almost assassinated, did that win him the election? It's possible. I remember when I saw the image of him, blood dripping down his face, surrounded by Secret Service members, pumping his fist in the air and saying, fight, fight, fight. The first thing that crossed my mind was, oh boy, did this just win him the election? And it was a close election, guys. It was a close election. It wasn't as close as 2016 or 2020 electorally. The popular vote wise, it was. Hillary Clinton won by a larger, in terms of the popular vote, won by a larger percentage than Donald Trump is projected to win this time. And Joe Biden won by a much bigger percentage. So this was actually a close popular vote finish. Electorally, it was a convincing win. But if you break it down to 3 states, we're talking about 250,000 people. How many, what percentage of that is, how many total voters were there? So what percentage of the electorate decided this election? 2024 election results. So we'll do, I'm not even going to include Jill Stein. It is roughly 150 million people. It's 151 million people. So 250,000 divided by, what did I just say? 151 million. The election was decided by 0.0001% of the electorate. That's what 250,000 people out of 150 million amounts to. 0.0001% of the electorate decided this election. And you don't think that it's possible that the assassination attempt was the thing that like helped him in the end? I feel like we haven't even talked about that. It's entirely possible. In fact, it might even be likely that that's the reason why he won.
The camera loves him, and he's great at the power of television. If you look at RFK Jr., you look at Tulsi Gabbard,
that little Matthew Crooks, Jesus Christ, what was he thinking?
You look at Marco Rubio, you look at even Matt Gaetz, look at all these people. What's the common theme? They're all good talkers, and they're good on telly.
Unqualified.
Whereas if I think, of course, everyone can have their view about their politics, but they are good performers on television. If I try and think of a lot of Democrats in that camp who are good at articulating policy on television, I start to really struggle. I do. I think it's important.
But why are we giving Trump credit for optics right now, Piers? Piers, the thing about all of his picks is that they're virulent neocons. He picked Mike Huckabee, who's an end times fundamentalist Christian, to be ambassador to Israel. This guy thinks the rapture is going to happen and Jesus is going to come back in his lifetime.
You know why he picked
Brian
him?
Hook.
You know what?
Literally true. Literally true. He looks at Israel in the context of biblical prophecy.
For State Department.
He picked him because
Trump's a neocon. That's why he picked him.
He picked him because he has such a thumping mandate on November the 5th. But
it was not a mandate. He's just rewriting history. It's like an 8-seat majority in the House, like a 3-seat majority in the Senate. I mean, it's a majority. But if he oversteps, chances are, if historical precedent holds, chances are, if he oversteps and starts treating this slim win as though it's a broad mandate, and he starts pursuing policies that are going to be deeply unpopular with voters, he will get punished. He will get punished in 2026.
No, but do you criticize that? Do you criticize that though? Are you against?
I don't think it's any surprise. It's it may be a surprise.
He does not have a mandate.
It may
this
be
is the
a
craziest
surprise.
talking point I've heard.
Well, hang on. Hang on. My point is the Democrats had such a terrible campaign with a terrible candidate. You reap what you sow. You've allowed Trump to do what he wants, right? So I'm afraid.
Do you criticize his neocon picks? Do you criticize?
Here's what I
think.
It doesn't matter what I think, because the truth is,
it does. Yes,
Trump,
it does.
Trump was very pro-Israel the first time round. He was always going to be very pro-Israel this time round, and you guys have allowed him to win with a thumping mandate. So the real point of this
not a thumping mandate.
The real point of this panel
What are we talking about?
some self-awareness that you've allowed all this to happen. I mean, Nina, I want to come back to you just briefly.
What self-awareness? He is picking neocons. Are you going to criticize
He's
for
picking
it?
them because he's allowed to.
Or not?
He can pick
He's
them.
allowed to, but are you against it? Are you against it?
I'm against some of it, yeah.
You have nothing but criticism for Democrats, and you have no smoke for Trump, apparently.
Listen, I regularly have criticized.
Get him, Kyle!
Trump.
Two things.
Take the neocon picture bad right now. Do it,
brother.
I would not go bad right now. Let me answer the question. I would personally not have picked Matt Gaetz to be the Attorney General pick. I think
it's like the easiest. That's like the easiest one to criticize. It's the easiest one to criticize. I don't even know if it's the worst pick. It's pretty bad, but I don't know if it's the worst.
I think it's ridiculous, right? I wouldn't.
Two things.
You should call him up and tell him that. I know you guys talk on the phone.
He won. So to
Sorry.
the victor goes the spoils.
Yes.
We all can agree with that.
Yes.
The man won. The Democrats left the door, the windows open. They
Everything
even opened
open.
the door.
Come
he
in,
has
burglars.
won. There is a however to this. Yes, he does get to nominate whoever he wants to nominate in his cabinet. If the Senate is so upset with any of those nominees, then they can reject those nominees. That is likely not going to happen. The other side of this is true that some of the people that
I don't know. A lot of smart people have serious doubts about Gaetz. A lot of smart people have serious doubts about Gaetz.
he is picking, and let's use Congressman Matt Gaetz for the prime example. He wants a yes man in the Attorney General's office. That is it, because Congressman Matt Gaetz has shown clearly that he will do every single thing that President-elect Donald J. Trump tells him
Nina,
to
I have
do,
one question about that.
regardless.
Okay, I have one question about that.
Regardless of whether
Okay,
it's right or wrong.
Here's my point about that. Trump's being attacked for choosing loyalists, to which my response would be, should he have actively chosen disloyal people? I mean,
it's not about that. When you swear an oath, when you're sworn into the to the executive branch, you swear an oath to the Constitution. That's what you're swearing an oath to. The whole thing about like the American Democratic Project is that we don't do kings. Like the American president is supposed to be subject to the same laws as everybody else. They're supposed to be subject to our checks and balances. They're subject to our institution. They're subject to our courts. They're subject to the Congress. They're subject to the voters. This idea that you would weigh personal loyalty above competency in any given role in the executive branch is just insane.
No,
Seriously.
I'm not. Listen, I'm not attacking him.
Who would,
What
if you're president, pick people that might be...
What do you mean you're not attacking him? For prioritizing personal loyalty?
I'm not attacking him. What I am saying is that we got to call this what it is.
Come on, Piers.
I feel like I just lit a tinderbox.
That's not why we're attacking him.
Not attacking
That's
him.
not why we're attacking
I said he has every right to pick these people, and we have every right to weigh in on his picks.
Yeah.
But the Senate has the final.
That is true.
say.
That is true. We got to leave it there. Brilliant panel. Thank you all very much. Blue on blue. Blue on blue was
Cenk, poor Cenk.
good, but I do feel like blue on blue. You've got to keep talking to each other, because out of this unholy mess, the reality is you've all allowed Donald Trump to get back in with even more power than he had first time. So you can all have a problem about
Turner
it.
and Jon Stewart.
This is on you. I actually agree about Jon Stewart.
Nina Turner, Jon Stewart, 2028. I just threw up in my mouth a little bit. Maybe Jon Stewart. Maybe Jon Stewart. Maybe.
I think you'd be great. So get on the phone to Jon Stewart. Thank you to my panel. Appreciate it.
Jesus Christ.